Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Nick Whalen, Joe Bartel here with you for one final pre-draft episode. Joe, I know you are itching to get to Green Bay. You'll be heading out there on Wednesday. I'm heading out to Vegas on Wednesday. We will be in two very different locations, but equally tracking the draft as closely as we can this week. Very excited for Thursday night, especially. I cannot think of a draft, Joe, where things have remained this unsettled. We've gone into plenty of drafts not knowing who the number one overall pick would be. Somebody I saw on Twitter today tweeted out that the morning of, I think it was the 2018 or 2019 draft, whenever Baker Mayfield went number one overall, he was 25-1 in the hours leading up to the draft. So we don't necessarily have that extreme uncertainty as far as who's going to go number one. All indications are that it will still be Cam Ward, but we get reports earlier today that not only are the Browns, but also the Giants potentially fielding calls on moving out of 2 or 3. The Jaguars seem to be calling everybody. They're either interested or not interested in every prospect who could be available at 5. That's another team that we could see trade down. So we'll talk about some of those scenarios. We'll certainly talk about Shedeur Sanders. We'll dig in on what someone's Green Bay Packers may do in round 1. We'll talk about the quarterbacks and some of the developing situations. But before we get into any of that, we are brought to you by Ultra GM. Have you ever dreamed of managing your favorite pro football team? Do you watch your team and think the GM got it wrong again? Do you think you could do better? Here is your chance to prove it. Introducing Ultra GM, a revolutionary new take on fantasy football that makes you the general manager of your favorite team. Start with the team's full roster and build it through the draft, free agency, trades, and even the practice squad to create your ideal team. No fantasy football platform or GM simulator has ever provided the degree of realism and engagement that Ultra GM offers, and none has ever given you the opportunity to manage the team that you love and care for the most. Compete against family, friends, and even your team's real GM to see who is the Ultra GM. Think you could do better than your team's current GM? Visit ultragm.com to prove it. All right, Joe, you got a mock draft up on the site. We talked about that on last week's episode, but still plenty of time to go check that out. I know Mario Puig has a full 3-round mock up on RotoWire. We'll have plenty of content continuing to come your way leading up to and after the first round on Thursday. We're going to do some fun exercises on the show today, kind of pick through some unlikely events that we think perhaps are the most likely of the unlikely. That will become more clear and will make more sense than how I just explained it once we get into it. But I do want to start right away with the shifting Shedeur Sanders market, Joe, because this is something we've been tracking really closely for a recent show, Prop Points. And as you know, for the last couple of weeks, the New Orleans Saints have been the betting favorite to take Shedeur Sanders. Now, there's been plenty of smoke around New Orleans that they're not all that interested in Shedeur, that they prefer Jackson Dart. I don't know that they would take either one of them at 9. We will see. But how much are you buying the Pittsburgh Steelers now as the betting favorite for Shedeur Sanders, whether they take him at 21 or would have to move up or maybe even get him in round 2?
Yeah, to be clear for the listeners, it's Shedeur Sanders plus 190 right now on various platforms for the Steelers, and then plus 200 for the Browns. So we can have the headline now, Shedeur Sanders is a odds-on favorite, but in reality, it's neck and neck tie, which I love. Let's get the clickbait going right away. Let's dive into this. I still believe there effectively is only one landing spot for Shedeur Sanders, and it is Kevin Stefanski in that Browns offense. I actually think if there's one spot I was to wish cast where Shedeur goes, it's not as a top 10 pick, but hopefully to the Browns in some capacity, whether they trade up or whatever else. And we had discussed that in my mock draft again last week, which seems now pretty unlikely that Shedeur Sanders will be a top 10 pick. He's actually odds on favorite to be outside that group. And again, with the Steelers sitting at 21, don't have a second round pick. We mentioned it with Jalen Milroe as well too, with their interest. If the Steelers want to draft a quarterback, it basically has to be at 21. And I've seen that happen with my Green Bay Packers time and time again. When you make your needs so obvious and so decided, so many teams have the opportunity, if they do like Shedeur more, if they really want to emphasize Jalen Milroe as a quarterback prospect, you could just jump to 20 or 19 or 18, whatever. When you make it such a obvious landing spot for a quarterback to be, and the Steelers have done this before. We mentioned with Najee Harris last show that a couple of years ago, everyone's mocking Najee Harris to the Steelers, and it happened. I think it's a bad way to do business. It's a bad way to have the draft. And I almost wonder, given I think the Steelers are a smart organization, if there might be just a bit of smokescreens being put out by Pittsburgh to go ahead and have somebody kind of make the exact move I referred to. It might feel like we're playing chess when in reality this could just be checkers. But I'm almost surprised to the degree that we've seen this develop for the quarterback market for the Steelers. It doesn't feel like that obvious of a need. So that's going to be 21, and whether it be Shedeur or somebody else, it is very fun to note it, if not.
Does whatever transpires with Aaron Rodgers impact the Steelers' draft decision whatsoever?
Yes and no. The reason I don't think the Steelers have such an obvious need at quarterback is because I almost feel it's guaranteed that Aaron Rodgers will sign with the Steelers. Now, there has been a bit more, Aaron Rodgers would love to go to the Vikings. Yeah, I'm sure. I would love to be the quarterback for the Vikings too. I don't think it's going to happen. They've kind of ruled that out already. It feels like that the organization would choose to go back to it. There's a number of other backup quarterbacks that the Steelers could talk themselves into. They could talk themselves into Mason Rudolph. Like, it doesn't have to be Aaron Rodgers, then draft a quarterback. I just think if Aaron Rodgers is there, it allows you to do whatever they want. And if it is best player available, if it's best decision for your team available, that's probably the better term, because neither Shedeur Sanders nor Jalen Milroe is the best player available at 21. But if it's the best decision for your team, you're insulated by having Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback for at least one more season. So I still assume Aaron Rodgers is going to be there in Pittsburgh. I think it makes a lot of sense with DK Metcalf and George Pickens. I assume they'll add another slot receiver at some point, probably in round 3. All that would add up to me that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback for Pittsburgh, and it makes no difference what they do at 21 then.
I want to ask you about the Jaguars before we get into our exercise, if you will. And we'll also talk about some best case, worst case scenarios in terms of player fit, some fantasy forecasting later in the show. Jacksonville's been active. They're working the phones. They're working the reports. They are throwing smoke screens left and right. I don't know what to believe at this point, Joe. You know, I follow this team very closely. They're currently picking at 5. They have attempted to either link or unlink themselves to just about any prospect who could be available in that range. There's been some Ashton Genty smoke. There's been some trading down smoke. Ted McMillan could be in the mix. Mason Graham, of course, could still be the pick, although Adam Schefter reported Tuesday morning that the Jaguars are apparently not interested in Mason Graham. I know it's not the Packers. It's not a premier franchise, but this does matter. The Jaguars have a very valuable pick in this draft that I think will determine a lot as far as how the rest of the top 10 shapes up. So as of right now, if you had to hazard a guess or handicap it, how do you see this playing out for Jacksonville? How likely is a trade down versus staying put at number 5?
You said at the top of the show, and I want to be clear, I don't recall a time in which the NFL draft 1 through 5 has felt as certain over that duration, even much less 6. Ashton Genty, we could probably get to it as well too, was the odds-on favorite to be selected by the Raiders or at number 6 overall if somebody were to trade up for at least the past week or so. And I mentioned this on the Jim Coventry Monday Marathon. You can follow the RotoWire Fantasy Football Network. Jim had 25 different guests on. It was awesome. Get to talk a little bit of NFL draft coverage and some bets as well too that all the guests had to make. This doesn't happen normally. Like, even if like the Trevor Lawrence year where it's number 1, it's okay, what's going to happen at 2 with Zach Wilson or anything else at quarterback? Or there's been instances where you have that Baker Mayfield draft, but for the most part, pick 1 and that's it. And to say, all right, it's going to be Cam Ward, guaranteed number 1, and now Travis Hunter for sure going to the Browns. Minus 800, I think I saw earlier today or yesterday. And then by default, with Travis Hunter gone, then it's just Abdul Carter at number 3. And well, then the Patriots need to tackle at number 4. So they're just taking Will Campbell. That doesn't happen. That's not normal to have it be 1 through 4 just automatically laid out like that. And I really can't poke holes with any of the logic that's been formed. It would have to start with Travis Hunter. I don't think the Browns should value Travis Hunter more than Abdul Carter. I would flip it around. But even still, if it's Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter at 2, it's going to be the Giants is taking whatever one of those is left. And yes, every team wants to trade down, like you mentioned. It has to make sense for the team to do it. Like, if to get it's not like, oh, I'll throw you a 7th round pick. Like, no one's going to do that. You're just going to take the blue chip prospect there. So I actually think the draft does start at 5, like you're mentioning. And I had Mason Graham as the defensive tackle for Michigan as the guaranteed pick at number 5. Again, that was like minus 400 or 450 at some points last week.
Yep.
The winds have shifted a little bit with that move, and it certainly seems like the Jaguars want to partner their new offensive coordinator head coach with an offensive tool, whether it be Ted McMillan, or more likely, I think, Ashton Genty. There's been a lot of discussion about Ted McMillan not being worth a top 10 pick. If you look at it, the odds are actually shifting downward, that he will not be a top 10 pick right now in DraftKings. I think that matters. That the NFL clearly views Ted McMillan not among that elite tier, and that Jacksonville doesn't seem to be interested in drafting an edge rusher, which is fine. They've had a lot of defensive drafts over the years. I get that completely. I think it might be Genty at 5. And what I can't tell is that smoke to get a team to trade up for 5 that really wants Genty, like the Bears, for example? You think it is? Okay.
I think it is.
You take it from here, because I'm very curious. The idea of just getting the best player available, which a lot of people think is Ashton Genty, fits really well with Liam Cohen and the offense and what that would feature, even with Travis Etienne on the roster. But you're kind of going the other direction.
I love Ashton Genty, one of the most fun prospects to evaluate in a long time, one of the most fun college players in a long time. The Jaguars have other needs. And look, I think you made a good point a couple pods ago when you said that Ashton Genty might be good enough that he can kind of mitigate some of the offensive line issues for these teams that we're talking about drafting him, whether it's the Jaguars or the Raiders or the Cowboys, whoever it may be. And I do buy into that to some degree, but I'm also one of the few Travis Etienne supporters out there. I think Tank Bigsby is a replacement level back. Like, we've gone through this song and dance before with Leonard Fournette, and obviously Genty is a different prospect, and we would expect that to turn out better than Fournette did. And Fournette had a fine career. He had a fine career, but there's also a chance that that's how it could go with Genty. Like, I'm not trying to do the devalue the running back thing by any means. Like, I'm actually glad that we are back to a spot where it feels like teams are properly valuing one of the most important positions on the field. But I think you would be better served trading down, adding another asset, even if you're not picking up the kind of first round capital that you normally would when you're trading out of the 5th overall pick, because this team has a need at tight end. They have needs on both lines, offensive and defensive. They were the worst secondary in football last year. And I think you take Ashton Genty at 5 and it's a flashy pick. It's, GM's first ever draft pick. All right, we made this big splash. That's great. You can sell it to the fan base, but I don't think that solves any of the issues for the Jaguars. Like, I didn't watch this team for 17 games last year and think, man, if they had a better running back, man, this could have been a 12-win team. No way.
Let's play out a scenario that I think is not plausible, but more likely than a lot of people want to admit. I think the worst case scenario for Ashton Genty is like a Najee Harris as a first round selection.
Sure.
And people might aggregate that. You might think that's kind of an asinine statement. Fine. This is not Saquon Barkley. This is not Ezekiel Elliott in terms of top running backs. I don't think this is Todd Gurley. I don't think this is Bijan Robinson. And Bijan and Ashton Genty are probably the closest of that group. I'm not saying I don't like Ashton Genty. I really, really, really want to make that clear. I think Ashton Genty is well worth number one overall, even in Superflex drafts, in rookie leagues. I would trade a lot for him, although maybe not as high as Keep Trade Cut would have him in Dynasty. Like, Ashton Genty is more than likely going to be a good running back and a really good one. But this is not, I have no idea how anyone could view Saquon Barkley as anything but the best running back prospect we've seen in some time. I think Bijan Robinson had been projected to be that for 2 years at that point and largely played out on the field. There's some concerns about the level of competition Genty played. There are some concerns it's not 4.37 Jonathan Taylor level speed. I don't think that's Genty's game. It doesn't have to be. But, like, worst case scenario is Najee Harris at 5. That's not something I really want to deal with. And in fact, the team that would have most likely did that was your team with Leonard Fournette way back when with Jacksonville. Not that this is an organization that ever remembers that or really cares, given the amount of head coaches and general managers they cycled through. But, like, if there's one team to say, man, I get the Genty looks really good, but if this bad scenario happens, it would be kind of not a good spot for us. It's Jacksonville. So I really don't believe they're going to take him at 5. I also don't think they're going to get anything worth draft capital wise to trade out of it. So I'm going to stay by Mason Graham still as a top 5 pick, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the general lesson here is that nothing is guaranteed, right? I don't care if it's a quarterback, a running back, a lineman, whatever. Like, no picks across any sport, any draft. Even there have been so many picks that we could, if we really wanted to dive back and say that guy felt like a lock and he wasn't. There's just, to me, there's too much. Not even downside with Ashton Genty, but it's too much downside about the situation, as far as what the opportunity costs that the Jaguars would be passing on to shore up another position and still have a chance to add a very good running back, not a Genty level running back, but a very good running back if they so choose later in the draft. But that is enough Jaguars talk, Joe. We will we'll get to what we want to discuss here. It's kind of our main topic. So you have listed 4 options here, unlikely things that could happen in the first round. Number 1, we have a team that trades up for a running back. And we're essentially looking at, running backs who could go in round 1 outside of Amari and Hampton and Ashton Genty. 2, we have the possibility that 4, not 3, 4 quarterbacks could go in the first round. We have an exceedingly unlikely scenario historically, which is the Green Bay Packers taking a wide receiver in round 1. And scenario number 4 is that Shedeur Sanders falls outside of the top 20. So you came up with these. I'll let you explain some logic and how you want to break these down.
Yeah. So you had mentioned this as an exercise. It is, more or less an exercise, but to me, I'm competitive. I want to win just about everything. We could talk about the mock drafts that I've done before. Those are likely not going to happen to be ever picked correct. That'd be crazy. If we're just sticking to first round situations, I effectively want to do a draft with you. I'm going to give you different outcomes, different spots. We'll go over like the best case landing spots for players as well too, and the worst case landing spots. And I wanted to put the scenarios up to the listeners as well too. We're going to tweet this out because I kind of wanted to draft a team basically of these three different silos, three different criteria. And we'll start first with what I thought was things that are unlikely to happen and from a betting perspective are not considered favorites, but what would be the likely version of that? So again, four different scenarios to play out. And I want you guys follow along, kind of play along. What do you think is the most likely of the unlikely things to occur? So just to reiterate what Nick had said, a team trades up for a first round running back. I think right now, first round running back is probably the best way to do this, although I'm sure there'll be trade ups in the second round, if nothing else. 4 quarterbacks going in the first round. Right now, the over under is set at 2.5. So add another quarterback into that mix. Packers for the first time in 20 plus years to take a wide receiver in the first round. That at the moment is plus 600 if you believe it's Matthew Golden or Ted McMillan, and then Shedeur Sanders to fall outside the top 20. We mentioned that with the Steelers as is. If I'm picking first in my own game, Nick, I think the thing that is most likely to occur of the unlikely situations is going to be the Packers taking a receiver in the first round. I get that this seems to be a crazy thing. You had Brian Gutekunst, general manager for the Packers, earlier today, despite having met Ted McMillan twice, both at the Arizona Pro Day and being brought in for a 30-player visit, effectively answer like, I don't really know who Ted McMillan is a player, kind of gave a non-sum answer to like, hey, what do you think about Ted McMillan as a receiver? How do you think you could watch the interview. I mean, it's Goody taking an awkward sip of water like he does for almost every question, and then giving just he's taller receiver. We like him a lot. He's a good kid. That was it. That's not at all what happens. Like if you look at Cooper DeJean, for example, last year, the Packers, who reportedly had a lot of interest in doing, yet didn't take him 3 separate occasions for the first 38 picks. He gave a lot to say about Cooper DeJean. So I think the Packers are in on Ted McMillan. I do think it'll require a trade up. Right. The Falcons seem like the obvious landing spot at 15, given they have so few picks after the first round, but it's certainly possible there's another team the Packers could move up for from 23. If they do not, I still think Jaden Higgins, either at 23 or trading down, feels like a possible selection. Again, receiver from Iowa State basically fits the Christian Watson mold. And I mentioned it last podcast. I'll say it again. Both Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, their contracts are up after the end of this year. You can't sign them both and sign Jaden Reed. It seems like 2 of the 3 will likely be signed. Cycling through with the draft right now, with this being in Green Bay, I think they are going to make a splash. I'm making this my likely of the unlikely selections to occur.
So what makes the McMillan situation unlikely to me is that I think it would require a trade up. Now, if we see a stunning fall for McMillan, which it depends who you talk to. Like some people think maybe he will be there at 23, and others think he could still go in the top 10. So there's a reason to me that DraftKings isn't even offering an over/under on Ted McMillan, because we just don't know. We have no idea. I still think it's very unlikely that he's there at 23. It's unlikely, but possible that Matthew Golden could be there. Do you think they're interested in Matthew Golden? Do you think it's McMillan or bust? For a team that has not taken a receiver in the first round in 23 years, it's one thing to just do that in general, but to then trade up to do it, there are too many reasons, too many things to point to, I think, in the history of this franchise that would suggest it's just really unlikely.
Yeah, and again, on DraftKings right now, Packers would take a receiver in the first round is the 4th of the best odds for the position. At the moment, it's even money on pass rusher, edge, or D-line. Then it's space between offensive lineman and cornerback is kind of 2-3. And then way down among that group at plus 600 is Packers take a receiver. I really think it is Ted McMillan or bust, but I actually think the first round overall is effectively Ted McMillan or bust. Like, I don't know if I've seen an over-under yet on the receivers, or maybe I haven't. I guess I missed it. But if it's at 3.5, first round receivers taken, I'm probably taking the under. I think it's Ted McMillan.
It's at 2.5. It's at 2.5, but it's minus 300 to the over.
Yeah, and Emeka Egbuka, which I guess I'm spoiling my content piece for today, but we're going to have a draft prop article posted later tonight or early tomorrow morning on the site. I've had wildly good success with that over the past 4 or 5 years. Ibuka right now is set to be minus 275 under 29.5. So that's the third receiver that DraftKings thinks. I have zero idea how that's going to happen. Like, unless the Commanders, who are picking at 29, take Ibuka, that's the only team I think that makes a lot of sense as a first round selection. Afterwards, the Lions, Chiefs, Bills, Eagles, there'll be a team that has to trade in the first round. I don't think that occurs. So I would almost rather say if we could find wide receiver 3 odds, Jaden Higgins again would be my selection over anything else. Cause I really think he specializes. He's a special fit, or specific fit, I should say, for the Packers, whether they pick a 23 or later in the first round.
So I wanted to ask you about Ibuka. I want to go a little bit deeper on that because I agree with you that it's more likely that if he does go in the first round, it would be one of those maybe final 4 or 5 picks. I think Washington maybe would be the spot. You're kind of looking for another Ohio State receiver to pair with Terry McLaurin. Can we rule out Houston at 25? Can we rule out the Chargers at 22? I mean, I would be very surprised if Tampa Bay pulled the trigger as high as 19, but that's a team that's been linked to some wide receivers. I mean, this is another guy where I think you're going to find a lot of different evaluations. I think some people view him as a day one, could be a really, really good receiver right away. He doesn't strike me necessarily as a Packers target, Joe, because I think if they're going to take a receiver in the first round, and even some of the receivers that they've taken in round 2 over the years, to me, it seems like they're shooting for upside. You think of someone like a Jaden Reed, you think of someone like a Christian Watson. To me, there's not a ton of upside necessarily with Ibuka, but you're getting a very, very safe pick there.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of think he should just be like an early second round pick. I mean, that was Lab McConkey, right? I mean, last year Lab McConkey was often discussed, and I think Lab McConkey has far more potential than a lot of these other receivers that are being in the same range. Jalen Royals probably be another one as well too. The other Iowa State receiver as well that gets considered. I think Ibuka could play slot. That's his best position in the NFL, but he doesn't have to play slot. And that's where the one value is over a few of these other receivers in that range. I don't think the Texans are in consideration for a receiver. They have twice now traded draft capital, both with Stephon Diggs last year, now this year with Christian Kirk, to improve the depth at the position. They've also drafted a few guys. The Alabama receiver who's I'm blanking on right now, but had cancer his first year. Unfortunately, like that's they've invested a lot of capital in that. And I think there's a point where you have to be like, well, just going to go with what we have. Like, I don't think we want to have another first round pick there, especially given the offensive line needs they have. And you had listed like the Buccaneers, not going to go that direction. Chargers at 22, I would imagine take somebody else besides a receiver, and none of the receivers available at that spot theoretically makes sense for them. It's just really tough. Like, I think teams could trade up into the first round, but my question is to why. I don't really know if there needs to be a way. There isn't a Xavier Worthy this year where the Chiefs are a bit more aggressive jumping ahead to go ahead and get him. So I think Ibuka is actually a very clear candidate to be outside the first round, or at least picked later than 29.5. And again, that's plus 200 right now. I think that I like that bet almost out of anything else at the moment.
I think the case for, a team perhaps trading to the back end of the first round is because I think you could see just about every one of those teams at the top of round 2 being interested in a receiver, right? Teams that have knocked out perhaps their biggest need at the top of round 1, a Jacksonville, Vegas, Tennessee. I mean, these teams are picking at the top for a reason. They all have needs. New England certainly at 38 would be in the mix for a receiver. So to me, that is the reason why that number is set where it is. I want to go over to the running backs market that you mentioned. And I know we titled it, teams to trade up for a running back. I don't know that a trade up is necessary for someone like TreVeyon Henderson to go in round 1, right? And part of that is, again, looking at the teams that are picking in that range. I think there's a case for Minnesota at 24. Do they want a succession plan for Aaron Jones? There's a case for the Houston Texans
quick,
at 25.
The Vikings only have 4 picks though in this draft, given all the trade ups last year. So to use one of your 4 on a running back at 24 seems rich to me. Like I think they're a candidate to trade back, honestly. And maybe there's somebody that jumps up.
That's fair. No, that's fair. That's a very good point by you. So, all right, maybe we could cross off Minnesota. But I think Houston at 25, again, it'd be another premium pick on a skill player, but you got to start planning for a post Joe Mixon life. Washington at 29, I think would be a really interesting fit. I don't know what you can reasonably expect out of Austin Eckler going forward. Brian Robinson is just replacement level at this point. Mm-hmm. And I think having a pass catching back specifically like TreVeyon Henderson would be huge for that offense. There's also been some interesting James Cook smoke, specifically today, skipping, voluntary workouts. Not that matters. Guys skip voluntary workouts all the time. He's also posting photos of himself in a Bills uniform on Instagram. The general manager, Josh Allen, want nothing to say about this. it's all about contract, right? And is there a world in which the Bills would look to move James Cook, say, all right, we'll bring in a rookie, we'll go forward with Ray Davis, we'll save some cap?
I don't know what team is acquiring James Cook and then paying
Yeah,
him $50
that's
million
the
a year.
hard thing I had too.
This
Where
is
it's like,
this
it
is
sounds
like I
great to
think
trade
he's
him, but who's buying?
overplaying his hand. Like I
Right.
get it. He scored a bunch of touchdowns last year. That's in part because Josh Allen is such a weapon for that team. The way they utilize James Cook is great. I don't think there is 3 or 4 teams in the NFL that could utilize James Cook in the same way. I think he's kind of a 1-for-1 unique spot. And career-wise, I mean, he was one of those running backs kind of fell a bit further in the draft. He still had premium draft capital. Like I was surprised when the Bills took him where they did. Yeah. This wasn't like, here's a first-round running back. And I think conversely, if you're the Bills, would it just be easier to pay the known commodity $14 million a year, whatever it might be? He might be a bit disgruntled about that. Maybe make it as like a 3-year deal and you can get out of it after the fact. He can get one longer contract. Or do you go ahead and possibly run into a Clyde Edwards-Helaire situation that Chiefs did a couple of years ago, which ironically, I do think the Chiefs would consider taking a running back in the first round again. So like that for the Bills who have yet to get there, they have yet to beat any of these teams that I guess really the Chiefs to be in the Super Bowl. That's a pretty big home run to try to swing at that. We're going to pull off this Titans trade AJ Brown, draft Treylon Burks situation at an arguably more critical position for that team with running back, given how much James Cook matters to Buffalo. I would be very, very shocked if the Bills trade James Cook and then draft another running back in the first round. That feels like a really, really hard needle to thread.
All right, let's talk about some of our best case scenarios in terms of player team fit, player landing spots, guys who could hit the ground running in terms of fantasy value this year. And the Denver Broncos at 20, to me, very, very interesting. I think an obvious running back spot. I mean, still a team that perhaps has some needs at wide receiver, but it feels like anything you read about the Denver Broncos, it's all about running backs. Amari Hampton has been a common link. There has been some Travion Henderson smoke as well. One, how likely do you think it is that the Broncos take a running back at 20? And 2, do you have a preferred fit there?
Yeah, I want you to look up what the Broncos running back odds are right now, because I guess I don't know quite yet. Again, this article will be posted later tonight, but I think that's one of those
minus 155.
155 in the year 2025, the Lord's year 2025. There is a running back that's minus 155 odds to be a first round selection. Seems crazy to me, but it's because the fits really make sense. I don't think Amari Hampton is. I don't think he is this obvious can't miss running back prospect in the same way that Ashton Genty is. And again, I didn't think Ashton Genty was the obvious can't miss prospect that Bijan was, or Saquon was, or Zeke. But Amari Hampton with Sean Payton with, I do think, better receiving skills that maybe my other colleagues give credit for, and the ability to be a better version of Javonte Williams, which I understand Javonte Williams was in the doghouse, it felt like almost immediately for Sean Payton. Yeah. A better version of Javonte Williams right off the rip and could be even more improved over his years. That's an infinitely valuable player for Sean Payton. This is not Alvin Kamara. Nobody has the unique balance of Alvin Kamara. Ashton Genty, ironically, does. But I'd be very surprised if the Broncos trade up to 5 or 6, whatever it is, to go ahead and do that. That Travion Henderson has been getting more buzz as a possible landing spot for the Broncos instead really reinforces the idea that they definitely want to draft at that position and that there needs to be a receiving acumen for that player to matter and be considered in that spot. I've heard Colston Loveland also as a landing spot potentially for the Broncos. They just signed Evan Ingram. I get that they want a blocking tight end and a do-it-all guy like Taysom Hill or even like Juwan Johnson was towards the later years of that. Oh, I guess maybe they didn't line. Whatever. I don't think they take a tight end at 20. And I also think Mason Taylor could be a very good fit for the Broncos if he ends up being like a mid to late second round pick, where seems like he's not going. Like Mason Taylor actually is one of those that's rising up to be a late first round consideration. But I would be very shocked if the Broncos take anything but running back. Minus 155. I don't want to bet that. It's too much juice, but feels very comfortable that they're going to go that direction.
All right, so we talked about what you believe is the best case scenario for Ted McMillan. That would be a Green Bay Packers trade up. But what about Matthew Golden? What are the landing spots you're looking out for him?
Yeah, I really think going to a place like Dallas, who really quietly, obviously needs a wide receiver too outside of CeeDee Lamb. I like Jake Ferguson a lot. Jalen Tolbert hasn't developed into that. Brandon Cook signed back with the Saints. Like there isn't another guy, and the Cowboys have prioritized adding flashy players over the past 3 or 4 seasons. That's why I had initially mocked him to trade for Ashton Genty. I think Matthew Golden being there, given how fast he is, that only helps things for CeeDee Lamb. Now, is Matthew Golden a top 5 dynasty pick if he goes to the Cowboys? No, I actually think all the targets are going to effectively still go to CeeDee Lamb. It'll make CeeDee Lamb better. It'll probably make the Cowboys offense better, but Matthew Golden overall probably doesn't elevate to anything more than Devonta Smith in that situation. So maybe that's not best case scenario, but I actually think Matthew Golden already maxes out in my mind. Best case scenario is Devonta Smith. So that he goes to a preferred landing spot like that is totally fine, in my opinion. I think Matthew Golden probably is more like a dynasty 6, 7, 8 overall asset in a rookie draft, depending on how these whole landing spots go. So again, I'm thinking that Matthew Golden is already best case scenario Devonta Smith, so that he goes to where he could probably line up to be that is great. And I also think a team like the Falcons, same exact thing. Drake London gobbled up a lot of targets. Bijan Robinson being an effective leader. It can't just be Darnell Mooney. And also, it can't be the Ray McLeod gets 950 snaps. I think I saw Mario Puig in his 3-round mock draft mention that too. I kind of forgot that Raymond McLeod played almost 1,000 snaps last year. That can't be a thing. Maybe you don't need to use pick 15 to do that, especially when you have so few picks overall. But that cannot be a part of their offense this coming year. So Matthew Golden kind of being that same sort of operator as the best case Devonta Smith scenario, that's a good spot to be.
Let's talk some Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan, Joe. His over-under right now at DraftKings for draft position, 17.5. Shaded pretty heavily to the under, minus 400 to go within the first 17 picks, plus 270 to go beyond.
I'm shocked
17.
by that, by the way.
Well, talent-wise, I get it. And I think with there being a dearth of pass catchers in this draft, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets pushed up. But I think when you look at the teams picking in that like 11 to 20 range, there aren't a ton of tight end needy spots. You could make the case for a few. I think the Colts would be an obvious one, and we'll see if they maybe throw their hat into the ring for Tyler Warren. I don't know if he makes it to 14. Maybe they could trade up. There's been some rumor around that, but what are the teams that scare you most? Because I know you like the idea of Colston Loveland ending up at 22 to the LA Chargers. Maybe we could see a slight trade up if the Chargers do, make up their mind on Loveland, but what are the teams as you're watching the draft? Let's say you have some investment in him going specifically to the Chargers. Like, what are the danger zones when you're saying, okay, I'm not worried about this team, but I am worried about this team taking him?
Yeah, the Colts are the worst case scenario for either Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, in my opinion. The way that they seem to emphasize having 4 different tight ends on the roster, none really getting any sort of step, but all of them having draft capital related to that, and Mo Alley-Cox still being a factor is gross to me. Like I want a true number 1 tight end. Like just give me the number 1 tight end. Can it just be Travis Kelce getting all the targets? Not, we have to use X personnel sort of thing. And I think Tyler Warren, because he's so flexible, that would hurt him. That Colston Loveland is as good of a run blocker as he's a pass catcher. That would hurt him for the Colts. We care about the fantasy implications of things. And I think the worst case scenario is Colston Loveland going to the Colts. By the way, I do think that would happen too. Like, I don't know if there's this player will get drafted by this team, but I would rather say the Colts are going to draft Colston Loveland than Tyler Warren, all things considering. So I do think that worst case scenario happens.
To interject on that, we have very limited markets as far as player to be drafted by a specific team. It's basically just Genty, Sanders, and then Tyler Warren for some reason. Colts are plus 165 favorites to take Tyler Warren for what it's worth.
And I'm saying I think that's wrong.
Okay.
I think that they're going to prioritize the guy that can do everything and do everything well. Pass blocking, can be a really good run blocker, can be I'm just going to say a Jason Witten comp because people know the name, but obviously they're far different players. Like, what if Jason Witten ran a 4.5? Like, that's a really interesting prospect, but also is a really good blocker, really reliable, that there's a good locker room leader in there. I think that adding that matters. Like, Colston Loveland, I could very well see be a Indianapolis Colt, whether it be at their pick or if they move down in some sort of capacity. It's the concern I have really in that range of teams who could trade out. And I'm saying, like, I want Colston Loveland to go to the Chargers because they would maximize him to be a good blocker, but also a fantasy asset, a pass catcher. Will Dissly last year was used that same way, but when he was the true number 1 tight end, he was also getting 4 or 5 targets. Colston Loveland, with the draft capital invested in him, I think would get even more. It's really wild to me, though, that there are teams that Colston Loveland's over-under at 17.5 is so high because teams typically don't take tight ends. And the assumption is Tyler Warren will be drafted before him. So the first 17 picks, 2 tight ends and 1 running back are to go there. That sounds crazy to me. And I get it that there's not a lot of quarterbacks that people like. There's not a lot of receivers that are going that high. The tackles all have question marks. Historically, we don't see that happen. Last year, the odds of a center being, there were 2 centers that odds of being first round selections. Both ended up going a little bit later on than what their projected totals were on DraftKings. I think Graham or Barton ended up still going in the first round, but Austin Jackson Powers was a second round pick. And I just made the case, like, history says the NFL doesn't view this position as a first round selection. History says the NFL does not see 2 tight ends in the top 20. That doesn't occur. So I really think strongly the over is in play, and yet the money, and it's been funneling down even further, that Colston Loveland is going to be top 17 pick.
Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain as far as the 2 tight ends going in the first round or going in the top 20 picks. I'm looking at the list now, and it is not extensive. This will have to be a separate research project for me to find the last time that has happened. I mean, we've certainly had multiple tight ends go in round 1, but as far as that high, I'd have to take a deeper look on that. So I mean,
that's the early 2000s for sure. Like that's right. We're talking about in the range of like Jeremy Shockey and stuff like that. Like, I think
how much of that, because there's been some interesting discussion as far as comparing Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland to the obvious, which would be Brock Bowers, who went 13 last year. There's a good chance that we'll see at least one of those guys, probably Tyler Warren, go either at or ahead of pick 13. Nobody's making the case necessarily that he's going to be a better player than Brock Bowers, that he's a significantly better prospect than Brock Bowers, any of that. But I think the scarcity of pass catchers overall, not just tight ends, but receivers in general, right? We had so many. If you're a team just in need of an offensive weapon, for example, in last year's draft, you had all these receivers to choose from. You don't really have that this year. So is that part of the reason that we're seeing these tight ends prioritized, because there aren't rival wide receiver pass catchers to kind of intrude on those draft spots?
Yeah, and there's not like a lot of different archetypes of that either. Like if you need an outside receiver, well, here's Ted McMillan, here's Jaden Higgins, and there might be like the Jack Beck's guy, Bechs, like that's those are your outside receivers for the entire draft. Yeah, 3 receivers for 32 teams, 260 picks. Oh, okay, great. That's not great. Oh, there has to be at least some underneath guys. No, they're all just basically slot receivers. That's not a great spot to be in. Tyler Warren is an offensive weapon. Like, I get that. We saw that in Penn State, what he could do, moved around. Colston Loveland is not an offensive weapon in that regard.
Right.
Was OJ Howard an offensive weapon? No.
At Alabama, he was.
Well, yes, he should have been utilized better in the NFL. But what ended up happening was he was a pretty good run blocker. So teams just kind of kept him around to be the run blocker. They didn't let him do a lot of the receiving things. I think that's what's going to happen for Colston Loveland too. It's a different NFL. So I keep telling myself Sam Laporta was a good run blocker and a pass catcher his rookie year. He got utilized far more, but we saw it year 2. All those red zone touchdowns, they kind of just evaporated. And then it was Sam Laporta's like tight end 8. That's not a top 17 selection. And Sam Laporta went early second round. I think Colston Loveland is a better prospect than Sam Laporta, but this is where I get confused because 17 selections, 2 tight ends going there, 1 running back, maybe 2 quarterbacks if you throw Jackson Dart into that mix. It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up to what the NFL tends to value. And unless they think something completely different than I do about Colston Loveland, I would just be sooner saying that there's probably not going to be 2 tight ends in the top 17 picks.
So the last time that did happen, we had 2 tight ends in the top 20, I believe, was back in 2019. That was 2 teammates, even TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant. Hawkinson went 8, Fant went 20.
Oh, Iowa. Yeah, I was going to wait. They didn't go to the same team. Yes, that's a great one. I bet you that hasn't happened. That's only happened once since like 2010. Like you might be able to look it up by now.
Yeah,
but
there's been plenty of, one tight end goes in the top 15 or 20, and then another goes out like 28. But as far back as I scrolled, and I went back to the early 2000s, that was the only instance.
Yeah, Loveland is a better prospect that he won't be like, oh, we're going to just get a 5th-year option to get a 5th-year option. That's the Mason Taylor in my mind,
right?
Who, by the way, could still be selected in the first round. Who knows what the Eagles want to do? Colston Loveland's better than that, but I'm just going to be really shocked if the NFL has decided this draft class stinks so much that we have to have 2 tight ends in a position we notoriously don't really care about, be among the top 17 selections.
There have only been 2 instances in the last 23 years where we've had 3 tight ends go in the first round. So that was 2017. Wow. We had OJ Howard at 19, Evan Ingram at 23, David Njoku at 29. If you go all the way back to 2002, Jeremy Shockey went 14. Daniel Graham, don't know who that is, went 21. And Jeremy Stevens That's Jeremy with 2 R's, Jerramy. Hard to believe that didn't work out. He went 28 to the Seattle Seahawks. So exceedingly unlikely in terms of the history, but I think that just trumpets even more the overall point that this is a unique draft. It's a very unpredictable draft. Who knows what news is going to break in the next 48 hours that's going to make us completely change our tune on some of this, Joe. All right, I want to hit a few more things really quickly. Talk a little Jalen Milroe. We did discuss the possibility that not 2, not 3, but 4 quarterbacks could go in round 1. And I don't know, maybe we need to include Tyler Shuck in that discussion as well. But Jalen Milroe plus 130 right now. That's been the price for a few days.
Hasn't moved,
Sportsbook plus 130 to go in round 1.
Shocking to me that it hasn't moved. And I think it tells you a whole lot that we've seen Shedeur Sanders now become the odds-on favorite again. Very small, plus 190, Pittsburgh, plus 200, Cleveland, but odds-on favorite for Shedeur Sanders to be the first-round selection by the Steelers. And that Milroe hasn't moved at all because of that is fascinating to me. I made the case in that mock draft, and I've made it in a few other publications as well, too. If the Saints are if you're looking at head coach Kellen Moore and the quarterbacks that he likes, Justin Herbert, obviously he's worked with, you had Dak Prescott as well, too, but more importantly, Jalen Hurts, most recently, I should say. Mobile quarterbacks with a strong arm. Justin Herbert isn't quite that same way. Dak Prescott, certainly before the ankle injury, was far more mobile than he's now. But that fits Jackson Dart. I think it really fits Jalen Milroe. And if you're to say, hey, Saints, taking Jackson Dart at number 9 seems a little bit off, although he seems very conveniently now listed as a guaranteed first-round selection, which was not the case 2 months ago when he was, not quite.
That wasn't the case 2 weeks ago.
It's crazy to me what's happened with Jackson Dart now just being uniformly considered a first-round selection. But fine, I could sooner see the Saints saying, we'll move up from pick number 9 in the second round to 29 with the Commanders. Then we get Jalen Milroe in the first round. We could still deal with whatever this Derek Carr baloney is at the shoulder, if that's real or not. And we have a first-round selection that fits our guy, our head coach that we hired. And we'll likely have some stay, given everyone knows that this franchise stinks, right? Like it will likely get to keep their head coach for a little bit while. I would be very surprised if a team does choose to take Jalen Milroe in the first round, but that his odds have not moved, that he got that green room invitation we talked about last week. There's just a lot adding up to me that I can't figure out. So I'm assuming I just don't know something that the NFL does.
All right. Anything else you want to hit on the way out here, Joe? I think we got to most of our major points. Talked to Buka, talked Tet McMillan. You mentioned, Tyler Warren to the Colts, maybe going to the Jets. Those would be among your worst case scenarios. Is there anything else that you want to get out here before you head to Green Bay?
This one won't happen. But if a team who takes Travis Hunter at number 2 or number 3, whatever it is, and then announce him as cornerback Travis Hunter, and then afterwards says, we think he could be an all-pro level cornerback for us, that's a worst-case scenario. It's a worst-case scenario for fun. It's a worst-case scenario for fantasy as well, too. But if Travis Hunter is announced, even in some coach speak, as a defensive back, as a cornerback, I don't want to hear for the next 3 months Travis Hunter complaining that he doesn't get to be a receiver. I don't want to hear the team trying to acquiesce to that, be like, really like him, we'll get him out there for 10 or 15 snaps. That's the worst case scenario for literally every single person. I desperately hope whoever takes Travis Hunter just says athlete, lets him be up there. All the post-game interviews afterwards, the Browns did something crazy and had Travis Hunter on their team. Such a great athlete overall. Don't tell us that he's just going to be a secondary guy. Even if everyone knows that's going to be the case, don't tell us, because I don't want to have to discuss this thing. I don't want to have to go over the for months and months and months. Well, what's the ADP value of Travis Hunter if he gets 20 snaps? God, that sounds awful. Worst case scenario for me is if somebody takes Travis Hunter and says he's going to be a cornerback. I don't know if it matters for fantasy wise, but worst case for me is Travis Hunter being announced as a cornerback. I do not want that to occur in 48 hours.
Well, I got bad news for you, because I don't think that debate is going to die down, regardless of whether somebody announces him as a corner, a receiver. There will be plenty of Travis Hunter discourse, especially as we get closer to fantasy season. Go check out Joe's mock draft. You can check out all of our draft coverage over at rotowire.com. We got some videos going up on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We'll have a bunch of social content. We'll have final mocks. We'll have Mario and John on the pod before the draft gets underway. player notes on every single selection. I know John McKechnie will have his post first round takeaways article coming late Thursday night. So make sure you check all that out. Use the code
Nick, I want to,
ROTO15
before we
at
sign off, I
checkout.
want to plug a couple things real quick. Again, I'm going to be in Green Bay. We're going to have the day 2 recap of all skill guys drafted again Friday, either Saturday morning. So following John's, we're going to have a ton of video content on the RotoWire Instagram channel, on the RotoWire TikTok, the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We're going to have stuff going on. Jim Coventry has his NFL Draft Marathon also happening on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And then me specifically on JB Fantasy Sports. Every single skill player drafted Thursday, there will be a fresh mug of my face up there on social media telling you how much this matters, where does it make an impact from a rookie perspective. JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. RotoWire is blowing this out for the NFL draft coverage. We have tons and tons of different things. And most recently, I'm going to have that prop article that we've been kind of referencing a little bit also coming as well, either tonight or early tomorrow morning. So I am not kidding when I say there is going to be at least 100 of hours dedicated in some capacity from our NFL draft team here Thursday through Sunday. And I think there are lots and lots coming. So rotowire.com, get that rotowire.com, rotocode 15 to get that discount to the site, to be able to read all that stuff, to be able to see all that stuff. We got mock drafts as well too on SiriusXM Sunday. Lots and lots and lots of stuff coming your way.
Okay, I guess we got to set the line at 199 and a half hours put into this by the RotoWire team. Excited to see what you guys do. Like I said, I'll be out in Vegas following all of the content and the channels from afar. And make sure you check us out on Prop Points 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern on the Visa Network. Myself and Jeff Erickson will be talking plenty of NFL draft this week. John McKechnie going to join us on Thursday. We'll have a full recap coming for you on Friday.